mess with people and troll. And, it could have been that. It also totally could have been someone who, was sitting around some outer ring of the White House or, some executive agency who said, well, I don't really have that much to do all day because all the president does all day is watch TV and try to shut down government agencies. So I'm going to freelance and create this whole mythology online and see if it goes anywhere. It could have been that. But it also just could have been like one financial incentive that we can track right now pretty directly is that Q, whoever or whatever it is, the person Q can only post originally on 4chan, then on 8chan, then on this thing 8kun. 8kun is this very endangered website because people keep posting like shooter manifestos on it. So all of the most deranged, radicalized people on the internet, not all of them, unfortunately, but a lot of them congregate around this website, and a lot of them end up being violent maniacs who shoot people in mosques or synagogues or whatever. And every time that happens, this website gets booted offline. The people who run that website, they're these two American guys who live in the Philippines. And they are like, their other businesses are like pig farms and porn, basically. So they're real wholesome, lovely fellows.
Sort of similar.
Yes, exactly. Pig farms, porn, and conspiracy cults. But there are people who believe, including the guy who founded this site, there are people who believe that the people who are running this site either know Q or are Q because they have a direct financial incentive to keep.
But these are morally bankrupt people. These are not people that think the best will rise to the top or that eventually it'll play itself out.
Right. So those original sort of techno-utopian elites that we're talking about, these are very far from that. Those people, like the original sort of techno-utopians, the ones who are paying attention have actually taken a turn now and are trying to have a more nuanced view. So a lot of what I was tracking was how the guys who started Reddit actually turned from that kind of blind techno-utopianism, the cream will rise to the top, to a more nuanced view where they said, actually, we got to get this under control because this has become this feral nightmare. So the 8chan guys are the most morally bankrupt people on the internet. They don't give a shit. They just want to watch it burn and they want to make some money. And so they will do things like, they showed up for congressional testimony wearing a Q lapel pin. Like they're just trying to make money from it. But
how do they make money again? Explain that to me.
Just traffic and ads. I mean, so that, and it's a pretty small business. It's not like a, $1 billion business, but the people like the Reddit people and to some extent the Twitter people, they are trying to go, okay, well, we're not going to totally abandon the idealism that we started this with, but we're no longer going to do this complete laissez-faire, free speech above all.
Right.
We're going to start to say like, okay, if there are people who are going to try to incite violence, like the guys who started Reddit actually, they went to the University of Virginia, which is in Charlottesville. And so I was talking to them right after the Charlottesville thing happened. And they were like, oh shit, that's our town. That's our alma mater. The people who organized this white supremacist march were doing it in part on our thing that we made up in our dorm room at the University of Virginia. And then they let me sit in the room and watch them as they deleted all these Nazi subreddits, which they never would have done in the early days. They never would have done it, and they never would have let me watch. But they had realized they'd kind of grown up from the 22-year-olds who were like, free speech, anything goes, and it'll figure itself out. The marketplace of ideas will sort it out, to evolve to this other place where they were like, okay, we have to be the bosses here.
But what's interesting is those kind of people still exist, these free speech kind of like laissez-faire attitude people, but they don't seem to realize that, if they let their sort of not utopian concepts, but what they're seeing as constitutional concepts just go unregulated, they're going to be killed by the people that they've created.
Yeah, I don't get, I
get how this... Who does Ben Shapiro think he fucking is?
Exactly. The thing that's weird about slippery slope thinking is that everyone can only kind of do one slippery slope at a time. Like, you hear the slippery slope argument of, if we shut down this person's speech, who's next? What if we shut down someone else's speech? I get that. I think that's legit. Lenny Bruce, got arrested for obscenity. Like, I get all that. But where's the slippery slope argument that goes, if we let the Nazis march around with guns, what's going to happen if the Nazis get too much power? Like, shouldn't we be worried about that slippery slope argument? Because I just, if you're going to be paranoid about one thing, at least be paranoid about all of it.
No, for sure. And I just don't, it's that kind of stuff, without getting off on a tangent, it's very hard to understand. Whatever the fuck is wrong with Stephen Miller, He's a Jew, man, and
Jew from Santa Monica.
Yeah, I know. And does he think he's going to get a pass when the shit goes down? I
do have to say, I've talked to some pretty hardcore Nazi propagandists, and not old school Nazis, but like the new Nazis, the alt-right, sort of in league with Richard Spencer types, and watching their minds explode when I bring up Stephen Miller is so interesting, because it's very core to their ideology that the Jews are the central problem.
Right.
That if we could just name and get rid of the Jew. And I'm like, seems like a Jew is running your shit, guys. And they're like, we don't know what to do with that information. It does not compute.
Oh, really? They don't know what to say? They have not said anything on it to you in any specific way?
They will say, you know what? That one really confuses us. Like, he really seems to be on our team. And we don't know. So
you're telling me that Stephen Miller might be the Jews' only hope?
He's the one. He's the one who can get through the door. I mean, these are. I mean, he was friends with Richard Spencer in college. Like it's not that many degrees of separation.
But that's a pathology we're dealing with, and his timing in history is something. But there's something a little screwy up there.
Well, it's related to the other pathologies we're talking about. This notion of sort of contrarianism and kind of this addiction to kind of being pugilistically engaged with the world.
Right.
There are people who get into stuff like Pizzagate or QAnon or whatever because it's just kind of a video game and they're kind of just exploring it. There are other people who get into it because they're like, the only narrative that can be true is the narrative that the institutions don't want me to believe, that society doesn't want me to believe, that my parents don't want me to believe, that my children don't want me to believe.
The bat. I want a bat.
Yeah. I want something to go to war with, and I want something to make me feel unique and special. And like you said, it's not that hard to relate to that basic impulse of like, I have this thing that no one else knows about. And, you talk to some of these people. What's really interesting is when you talk to people who've been all the way down the rabbit hole and then come out the other side, but who still remember what it's like. And they will tell you, like,
how often does that happen?
Less than you want it to. But there are a few people. There's this woman who I spent a lot of time with who was way high up. They called her the first lady of the alt-right. She was like helping to plan the Charlottesville riots, and she was she like got David Duke a hotel room with her credit card and all this stuff.
Uh-huh.
She made it out. And when she first met me, she was like, her brain was so scrambled that she was like, I know the Holocaust definitely happened, but like, was it 6 million though? Do we really know how many it was? Was it maybe like 1,000? I was like, no, I think they really know. Like, I think they've done the research. And she was like, yeah, I know, but did it really though? Like, her brain had just been fried from this immersion in this world.
Wow. So you're saying like, because oddly, when I was a kid, it was 10 million. And at some point they made a concession. I don't know why. When I went to synagogue, it was 10, and then it was probably more like 6. And we're like, well, okay. But
it's called making a deal.
Yeah. I don't know who with. But so that's the question. Like, so when these people get radicalized, whether they signed up for it or not, even people like my father, after a certain point, there is no return, kind of.
Yeah. For some people, it's really hard to get out because you've burned some bridges. You've like put some stakes in the ground. And
in your world, you've burned bridges.
In your world, you've said, like, you're all going to be, I'll get the last laugh. You're going to see. I mean, going back to the Christianity thing, this is like, there are preachers every so often who will literally predict the end of days. And they'll say, it's going to be October 22nd, 1844. Like, this is before any of this, like 10 years ago or something, I did a piece where, do you remember, I think it was 2011, where there was a guy who like took out billboards in Times Square and was like, May 24th, 2011, that's the day.
Yeah.
And so I went to Times Square because I'm like a reporter and I'm curious about this stuff. And I picked someone out of the crowd and said, what are you doing on that day? Can I be with you? And he was like, yeah, he was like a firefighter from Long Island. He was like, yeah, you can watch me get sucked up into the sky in a tornado. So I went to his house in Hicksville, Long Island. Yeah. And it's like funny, but also like he had a 4-year-old daughter and he was like, okay, honey, when this happens, you're going to want to walk out to the backyard. We're going to stand together. And his wife was like, I swear to God, once today is over, you better never bring this shit up again. Like, she was not a believer.
Right.
And so I stayed with him until like the time passed. Like, he called and ordered a pizza and he literally said to the guy, could you please hurry? Like, it's coming.
Huh.
And then I watched him as the time passed, and he was kind of doing some quick math of like, maybe I got the wrong time zone. Maybe it's happening in the Hawaii time zone. And then by midnight, he was just like, I don't know what to do. He just like stopped texting me, and I, just made sure with his wife that he was okay. And she said, yeah, he's okay. But like, how do you come back from that? How do you go back to your buddies at the fire station and say like, whoops, sorry guys?
Well, ultimately, if enough time goes by, they're like, that was weird, right? You okay?
Yeah.
And you know, that's not the same as like telling them, that Jews are terrible and that
or that everyone in the government is a child-eating pedophile.
Right, and we should kill all the Mexicans.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
I mean, it's a little different. The guy just had like, he had a dream, it didn't happen, now he's back.
Right. But there is a lot of pride wrapped up in it, and if you build your identity around,
that's the fucking problem. It's that pride. That like, you can't admit you're wrong after a certain point until something horrible happens. But how horrible?
It's your identity. Like if you're, the media told, like even at look at something as simple as how many YouTube compilations there are of the media getting the 2016 election wrong. There's just this feeling of like, we knew this was going to happen and you motherfuckers in the media, you got it wrong. That feeling can just be extended to anything.
Sure,
so
and then and also like there's if you're proficient in formats, everything looks like official, everything looks like news, and people I don't hear that talked about as much as it should be. Really, is that anybody can make a pretty professional looking thing, and
this is the key when I was talking about these amateur/professional propagandists. That's what makes someone be able to transition from amateur to professional, because you can register a website, you can make a Facebook thing, you can get it into as far propelled into the mainstream of the discourse as you want. That's why I sometimes get hung up on this semantic thing when people say fringe. I'm like, I don't know that this stuff is fringe, because you can get it into the mainstream of the news cycle within 5 minutes if you're good at it.
Well, yeah, it's a content hungry news cycle that spans the planet.
Yeah. There are people who, I mean, the people who were good at it, they would show me, okay, this is how I'm going to get this to trend on Twitter, or this is how I'm going to get Sean Hannity to mention this, or this is how I'm going to get, this to become a Drudge headline or whatever.
That's
and then
so
they would
break
it down, reverse engineer it, and just you would watch them do it. And this is what I mean, sort of specifically when I say that this is the system working as designed. The people who founded these things did not know what the content was going to be. To some extent, they were agnostic as to what the content was going to be. But if you had told them, like, your trending algorithm will be just habitually gamed, and not just by foreign actors or whatever, or spies or agents, but by just like people using the system well, I think if you could go back in a time machine and tell them that, hopefully they would have a little bit of pause and go like, okay, we thought we were building this system that was going to be a heat map of conversations and what people were interested in. But the fact that it could be gamed by anyone at any time, just through these outrage mobs and it's not even that hard. It just means that, one of the sort of refrains that I keep coming back to is this philosopher, Richard Rorty, who has this whole concept of contingency, irony, and solidarity. And that because things are contingent, the story of history has not yet finished being written. It can go any way, and so you have to change how we talk is to change who we are. What we talk about, what we value, who we are as a society, that's always up for grabs. So then you put that sort of underlying philosophy together with the notion that how we talk is we talk to each other through these internet boxes that are all manipulated according to heat cycles and outrage mobs and clickbait and manipulating our emotions. It's not a good thing. If how we talk is who we are, and how we talk is through these broken slot machines of generated emotion and excitement and manufactured engagement, it's very hard to see how that dynamic gets broken.
Not only the dynamic, but it's really, it's not who anybody is. It's really kind of a kind of brain fucking technology that holds people hostage and uses them as puppets. It's a trance almost.
Oh yes, it's preying on, and this is why, when people try to make the point that these are businesses like any other business, I think to some extent that's right and to some extent it's wrong. But I think at a basic level, it's like, if what you do is sell food and then somebody comes along and tells you that high fructose corn syrup is killing people, you go, well, I'm still in the food business, right? So until someone comes along and shuts me down, I'm going to keep selling this food, right?
Yeah. And people like it.
People like it. Watch. They'll get their revealed preferences. They keep buying it, right?
Yeah.
So what are you going to come in and tell me I don't have the freedom to give people what they want?
There's the argument against the cream rising, and also the argument against free market capitalism.
Yeah. It's very tied up in the free market stuff. We've been in this sort of spell of the last 40 years of saying, well, if people didn't like it, they wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
If it weren't a good product, it wouldn't be doing well. You know, it's all this like self-regulating thing. It's this Milton Friedman thing. It doesn't work like that. And that's, you can see it directly in this metaphor of the marketplace of ideas, right? The market has spoken.
So, all right. So now here, let's wrap it up by in thinking about, because I don't know what Jaron